primary focus is really on secondary and tertiary prevention. But we do offer a training called Stewards of Children. I'm one of the facilitators of that training, as two of my colleagues are as well. And we're willing to go out in the community wherever, and it's a free training, and we will offer it to parents, to teachers, to whoever is willing to sit through a 2-hour training. Because at least at Children's Hospital, we believe that we can prevent child abuse. We can also give the community at least information around if a child has been abused, this is what you can do next.
Okay, thank you. And then my next question to you, Ms. Allen, is the traumatic experiences that the young and older youths who have been abused, what have you seen as their healing process?
So I'd like to just touch on this a little bit. After someone has experienced a traumatic experience, an event, they may have nightmares and flashbacks, may be on alert for danger, may not want to engage fully in relationships, maybe depression, irritability, and so on, right? We know that trauma survivors have symptoms instead of memories. Trauma is remembered with our bodies and feelings. So when a person experiences a trauma, the nervous system is on high alert and remains prepared for danger. So oftentimes victims of trauma no longer feel like they have a sense of control of themselves. And so the primary goal is to really help reestablish ownership of their body. So in my experience, children need to be linked. I'm gonna probably say this 10 times today, but children need to be linked to mental health services that will address the specific trauma that they have experienced. They need to have a positive, trusting relationship with the therapist, because a child's not gonna share anything if they don't feel comfortable, right? And they don't have trust. And then even more important than the therapeutic relationship is a supportive, loving parent, caretaker, and because the caretaker offers this sense of safety and emotional support and reassurance. And just remember that they're not gonna always be in therapy, so they still need that one person, whether, even if it's not a parent or a caretaker, maybe it's just a friend, an adult friend of the family that they can trust, but they need someone in their life. We also want to keep in mind that when a child experiences abuse, the entire family is impacted. So referring parents and caretakers also to services is helpful sometimes. And then I have found, at least in my work, that unfortunately, that many of the parents of the children I serve have a history of childhood victimization as well. And so wanting to just make sure that we're sitting and having conversations with them and understanding where they're coming from and making sure that they have what they need as well. So I think it's just as important, at least in the work that we do, that we're working with children, but also their parents.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. So now we're going to shift to a question to all the panel members. And the question is, how do you see structural racism, the intersection of structural racism and the wealth gap? Mr. King.
I'll give you one statistic. So I was a teacher and a principal in Boston. There was a study done recently on wealth in Boston. It was called Color of Wealth. The median net worth of African American families in Boston, $8. Not 8,000, not 800, $8. Median net worth of white families in Boston, $247,000. So we have a wealth gap in America. It has a long history that is tied to our history around slavery and pillaging of the land of Native Americans and the annexation of lands from Mexico and colonization of Puerto Rico, right? There's a history behind that wealth gap, but it has very real consequences for kids and families. Think about if somebody loses a job and your net worth is $8, you have no fallback. And so losing a job isn't a temporary challenge, it's a express train to homelessness, right? If you don't have wealth, it means you are dependent on oftentimes your employer for health insurance. If you lose your health insurance, right, then how are you going to get your health treatment, your substance abuse treatment, your mental health services for your child or your family? Right? There's a vulnerability for folks who don't have wealth that is tied to our racial wealth gap in American society. And so ACEs are exacerbated, their impact, right, is exacerbated for our most vulnerable students because of the resources their families don't have. And so then that, to my mind, puts the responsibility on society to build a strong safety net for those families and ultimately to tackle our economic inequality. And to the extent that we don't do those things, we are leaving more children vulnerable to the impact of these.
Yes, Ms. Ward, thank you.
I guess it's my turn to chime in. I want to name that there's a difference between opportunity and access. And what structural racism and the wealth gap does is limit ever getting to opportunities or ever getting that access. It looks like thinking that everything's okay because your mayor's black, but your policies are very much led to white supremacy. And we live in a city where we're saying that everyone's getting a fair shot. I bring you greetings from the Great Ward 8. We're east of the river. We have one grocery store servicing 70,000 people. And the person who got the deal for the new grocery store is a white man who's not from the District of Columbia. What does that say to DC natives when everyone in charge of an organization or agency that looks to serve you is not from here and does not look like you? That means that you are not worth it, and the systems that were designed and telling you and marketing to you that they want to give you a fair shot are intentionally and sometimes impactfully, because the road to hell is paved in good intentions, correct? We're interested in the impact. And the impact looks like folks who are criminally susceptible. They're not looking to be criminals. Much like his story, he had no choice. That was failing if he talked to a police officer. If his father was to call the police because he didn't recognize who he was. We've had parents to do that before. Then they're going to jail. He could have never been the Secretary of State. And these are real lived realities. We have youth, what we call them future adults. Because for the average 14-year-old that I serve, they are the parent in the household. Because either their parent is so emotionally absent as a result of what the sister said, his sister Aquaman, that they can't parent. And then they have stair-step children as a result of that abuse. Often these children are made from loving relationships and intentional sexual interactions. And then these parents are angry about the results of responsibility that have come from their own trauma. And that's not the child's fault. And our community is not given the resources or the knowledge without some level of college, and college takes a coin, correct? Trinity serves a lot, UBC serves a lot of Ward 7 and Ward 8 residents seeking education. And just getting across the bridge is a feat. Is a feat. And so we don't have these conversations while we're having them in places folks can't go. And I want to stand here and honor Trinity because Trinity asked about making sure transportation over the Union Family Hospital. They're just at work, at school, and running programs. That's all. But we've got to be working in tandem to both and holding all of our elected officials accountable, holding all of our organizations who are getting coined to claim they are serving you, and they are not. We also must think that not all trauma is violent or sexual. And we've got to open our minds to what this looks like, and that not all traumatized youth are acting out, and those are the most dangerous, because they're never given an opportunity to heal. The student who's not saying anything is the one who might commit suicide, because that's their source of healing. That's why we have the only LGBT drop-in program east of the river. We have the most homophobic ward, the most LGBT youth live in Ward 8. And so if we're not naming that, and if we have organizations that serve LGBT youth but are under investigation by DBH, they shouldn't get any more money from the mayor, and they shouldn't be opening a second location. Period. And so I'm tired of the branding of trauma. I'm tired of Oprah said it was okay to talk about this. We must name that the ACEs study was done on predominantly white, middle-class children, and that's why it was named a public health crisis. When it was black children acting out in trauma, it was a war on drugs. It's the same thing. And if we don't walk away having that conversation, this is pointless, but you all are beautiful. And I'd like to end on that note.
Thank you, Ms. Ford. Ms. Larson.
So in the homeless domain, racial disparities are clear as day. In the general U.S. population, African Americans make up about 13%. The national homeless population, they make up 40%, even though the poverty, only 21% of those experiencing poverty in our country. So it's double the rate of homelessness among African Americans is double the rate of poverty among African Americans. In D.C., the African American population currently stands at 47%, whereas the homeless adult population at 87%. And I can tell you the last time I saw a child who was not black or brown in our homeless shelters, and it was about 15 years ago, and it was about 2 kids. And so it is extremely, overwhelmingly 100% black and brown in DC in terms of how it shows up. And therefore, we have no choice but to challenge ourselves as an organization to confront the racial equity reality that this is like hitting us square in the face. And we also know that, the stakes are so high for the children and families that we serve. You know, everyone across every income bracket is a victim of crime from time to time. But our families do not have that safety net to recover from the parking ticket, from the lost wallet, from the fraudulent activity that happens. I just got a call before coming here from one of our program alumni who I've known from when she was in the 1st grade when I was a school social worker in Ward 7. And she's experienced trafficking when she was 14, living at DC General. And she's now 21, and she called me in tears saying her boyfriend, who just got promoted at McDonald's, worked his first night shift, and he was a victim of a telephone scam where someone somehow convinced him that they were doing an investigation and somehow got both McDonald's and his own personal bank account information and drained his account, and rent is due in a couple of days. And she called me in tears. You know, young people make mistakes. Every young person makes a mistake. But for our kids, there is no safety net in many cases. There's no room to make a mistake. There's no room to learn those painful life lessons. And once again, this young woman who's suffered from homelessness many times as a child, and she and her partner are both working full-time trying to make it, and now she's facing homelessness again as an adult. So I just keep thinking about her throughout this conversation that we're having, because so much of what she's experienced touches on everything that she's been through as a survivor of trauma, and she's one of the most resilient people I know. But the deck is stacked so firmly against her that even though she's doing all the right things, she's still struggling so much. And shame on us if we aren't seeing that through a racial equity lens.
Sitting here reflecting on what everybody else has already said, it's sort of hard to capture all of the thoughts that have come up. I think when I think about the $8 family wealth, I think about parents who love their children and want what's best for them and want to respond and want to do the right thing, but there are no resources in their community. There's no resources east of the river. There's no resources for immigrants who are afraid to come forward right now. They have to take time off from their jobs and risk their jobs to make therapy appointments, to make medical appointments. How are they going to pay the copays? I mean, it's unbelievably difficult decisions. And then if they don't, right, sometimes social workers or sometimes investigators are looking at them and saying, why didn't you do this? I think too of a young woman that I saw yesterday who escaped from trafficking last week and had a really, really violent sexual assault at the end of her trafficking experience. And she aged out of foster care. She escaped to a different state, does not have health insurance, and I spent easily 4.5 hours on the phone in the hospital that I was in yesterday trying to figure out how I was going to get an ultrasound because she had terrible pelvic pain, and begging people to see her for free. There's a limit to what I can do, but she really needed an ultrasound. I spend a lot of my day going to different people, trying to get these trafficked youth and these maltreated youth the care they need and deserve, and watching the families too struggle to try and find something where they're going to be able to keep their job and be able to bring their kids to therapy appointments and to medical appointments.
I would just add, there were a lot of great comments, but I would just add the disparity when it comes to quality health care, especially quality of health care in certain communities. And quality health care would also include mental health care, right? So having those services in the community so families don't have to travel to Northwest DC, And so that's really, I think, what I'll add to what everyone else has said. Just wanting to make sure that our families all over the city have the same level of access and the same level of quality services.
Yes, thank you. As you can see, this is a very powerful panel of professionals. And let me just say before we open up to questions, as a licensed professional counselor, I'm also concerned about the emotional and mental health of everyone here. And so we've had a lot of topics that were pretty intense and it can really touch us. So I just want to let you all know that we do have a social worker here in the Health and Wellness Center, Annie Cosimono. She's on call right now, but you're welcome to walk out or even go up and see if she's available. Now I'd like to open up to the audience, and if you have questions for the panel.
We think that when a person has experienced ACEs and trauma, that they need someone to do everything for them, and that's actually not true. And so there's a lot of strength in individuals and communities, and I guess my question is, what is it gonna take in 2019 for us to finally figure this out? It doesn't make any sense to me why we still have politicians that are not doing their job. I'm coming from Baltimore City, where our mayor, the whole Holly Hobby situation. It's just unbelievable. And at the basic core level, basically each human being, a person who is surviving trauma and ACEs, they should have the same support and needs daily survival access that anybody. And it's just, I don't know what it's going to take. I hope that I still am alive when things are going to change, but it doesn't make sense to me today that we're still trying to figure this out. And I guess that's the question that I want to ask you. What do you think, if there was like one thing that you had the power to make a change in, that you think would help us get to a different place of wellness and doing better, what would it be? Thank you.
anyone can answer.
Because I'm the one with the least resources sitting on this panel, so I think that's for me. Broke people privilege is a thing also. I think we need to be honest about what we do and how we do it. I don't get a salary at the Future Foundation, so I am poor. I don't make $8 an hour. So as we use that number and you like what I'm saying, I don't make $8 an hour. We have programs that are supposed to give food access to my community, yet I'm paying for, they know me at Costco very well, I'm paying for and cooking the food for the youth, to the point that my youth will not eat anybody else's food, and that's just a thing that we've talked about. You're gonna have to move away from this, because I can't cook for you every day. It was a problem today, because I'm not making lunch. So, we have to be honest that it is as simple as how we used to do it, because we didn't have a choice, and that's what we know inside of us. The second thing is we have to name that it isn't a conspiracy theory that we're intentionally being siphoned from resources, right? And that we want to help the folks who are on opiates, although we gave them to them, but we didn't want to help the folks who are on crack. And they are both treating the same kinds of trauma. A lot of people don't like it when you make it a race thing, but that's not a race thing, that's a class thing, that's a capitalism thing, correct? A job shouldn't just be the coin that you get, it should also be access to more than an employee assistant program. And how many McDonald's have an employee assistant program? We've said nothing about stigma, and the reality of Washington, D.C. is very much how you present and not what you really bring to the table. And so I don't want to tell you that I am also a survivor of sexual abuse, and my great-grandfather was who raped me. But that's true. We've had this conversation. I sit here and I can tell you this because I deal with it every day. My youth did a radio show with their own parents where their mother talked about being abused by a family member and how she was open to her daughters and protective of her daughters because of that. And these teenagers now know that that happened to their mother because she chose to be honest about it after a conversation at our single parent support circle. Those parents renamed the single parent support circle to the super parent support circle because of stigma and because they wanted folks to know that whether you're a sibling that's parenting, whether you are a two-parent household, whatever the conversation is, we must come together about looking out for all of the younger people in our community. Some folks are grown with a young mentality. Regression is real, and so they don't have the skill sets. There are teen parents. So I'm both a mother and a child. And we aren't naming those intersections. We're just writing grants. And so sometimes I don't have time to beg for the money. It's just that simple. And that's an executive director's job, to sit, put on something nice and tell you, please give me some money. Resources don't always look like a coin. It looks like someone who's willing to pass the background test so that I can come and talk to you all, and someone else who has been trained in family-based supports can run the super parent support circle. Someone who has mental health first aid can go to Blue Stay, where we are Wednesdays and Tuesdays. These are the things we're doing. We work with teenagers. The reason why that decision had to be made is because I'm one person. And because when you look at the statistics, in the District of Columbia, someone is 13 when they decide not to go to school anymore, and in most cases 12. And let's be clear, everyone wants to play with the kids. No one wants to talk to the 16-year-old that's twice my size. And that's who I work with. And in 7 years, I've only been called a bitch once, and I've only had to put one child out the program. That's 2 children. So when we have schools that are repeatedly suspending kids, I have a problem, because Ms. Ayana doesn't have a full staff. Ms. Ayana has 2 staff and a community of volunteers. She mentioned Stewards for Children. Safe Shores has now expanded their program because a lot of money for them to get around to train folks. And there's a lot of need for folks to get that training that's provided from an organization called Darkness to Light. Guess what? It's $450 to become the facilitator that these 2 ladies are. But God bless Safe Shores, they felt I deserved a scholarship, and on May 1st, I can receive that facilitation. Before that, they were coming to the Future Foundation regularly, and there are parents here from other wards who were able to get certified because of Safe Shores outreach. So it looks like being able to find the people who are really doing the work and staying far away from the people who are not. Because just sitting beside them makes them look just a little bit valid. It's kind of like showing your lip in Wakanda. Everybody can't go, and that's okay. In some rooms you'll say Miss Ayana and it'll look like someone passed gas, and that's okay. It's all right. It may not be on the news. Y'all probably won't be able to spell my name when I leave, and that's okay. But you will know that in Ward 8, we're getting to it. And as long as we have a part in the whole pie, and as long as we're doing all we can and taking care of ourselves, because Rebecca and Suzanne are not going to take care of ours the way we take care of ours. We can't take care of Rebecca and Susan's the way she could, because our lived experiences are different, and that's okay. But if we don't want to name it and work on it and understand, the only principle the Future Foundation has is understanding, because trauma-informed principles are 6, so we didn't need any more. The reason for understanding, if I come to this table with an open heart and an open mind, I might not like a million things you've said, but I understand why you said that. That's all we need to do right now. That's all. And it's really all we can do given the way our administration is set up and the fact that DC didn't have statehood. And so that's why there's a political education arm to the Future Foundation. That's why every last Wednesday of the month, our Stay Woke DC youth do a Know Your Rights training. Whether it's a march coming, whether Black Lives Matter isn't there with us when we do that. And they make millions of dollars, and we don't see them in our community. So let me be clear, this is not just a white people thing. We've got to be looking and doing the research. We can't put on a Black Lives Matter shirt and say we're helping Ward 8, because we're not. Right? We can't just tweet and say we're talking to the community, because the people I serve don't have the internet. So if all I can do is register online, I can't get there. And those are the nuances of access and opportunity that can get us to where you want us to go. And you will be alive, sis. You will be alive, because your work is contributing, whether it's now or 101 years. What you put into it, that sweat equity, is how we're going to get there. So you will be alive, and you will